Let's get back into more of these top political headlines. We're going to do that right now with our friend there, political editor at the Washington Monthly, Bill Scher. He joins me. Bill, good to see you here. We're 20 days out, and we can't thank you enough. You've been so instrumental over the last year. A lot of good insight and analysis here. I want to talk about Kamala Harris, and I want to talk about her media strategy as of late. She's been out there a lot lately, and I'm going to ask you this. Is it too little too late, or is it just at the right time?
Well, I definitely don't think it's too late. Keep in mind, she only has been a candidate since mid-July, and there's definitely, I think, some fluidity in the electorate from people who still want to learn more about her and how she can withstand, the political heat. And she's run a very tightly disciplined campaign. She hasn't done a lot of interviews. She hasn't done a lot of unscripted things, but she's definitely ramped that up now. And so to the extent that there's been this chatter, can she handle it? Is she competent in those settings? Those bars have been set, and obviously it's been a Rorschach test how you feel she does when she does these interviews. But I would argue, at minimum, there's been no real kind of gaffe moment. There's been no thing that becomes its own news cycle that puts her on the defensive, and that in itself, I think, is a success for her.
Okay, because that had been something that had dogged her for quite some time when she became the nominee, about her reluctance to, speak to the press in some of these more traditional formats. She's been on kind of non-traditional, unorthodox formats like podcasts and the like here. And she was on with Bret Baier of Special Report at the Fox News Channel just today. And so I want to play some of these clips that we have from that interview with you. And we can get into one of these other questions that she has been facing ever since she became the nominee. How will she separate herself from President Joe Biden? If she were to win the election, how might a Harris administration look anything different like a Biden administration right now? And Bret Baier asked her this. Let's play that exchange here.
So you're not Joe Biden, you're not Donald Trump, but nothing comes to mind that you would do differently?
Let me be very clear. My presidency will not be a continuation of Joe Biden's presidency. And like every new president that comes into office, I will bring my life experiences, my professional experiences, and fresh and new ideas. I represent a new generation of leadership. I, for example, am someone who has not spent the majority of my career in Washington, D.C. I invite ideas, whether it be from the Republicans who are supporting me, who were just on stage with me minutes ago, and the business sector, and others who can contribute to the decisions that I make about, for example, my plan for increasing the supply of housing in America and bringing down the cost of housing, addressing the issue of small businesses, which is about working with the private sector to bring more capital and access to capital to our small business leaders, including my plan for a $25,000 down payment assistance for first-time home buyers and for small businesses, extending the tax deduction from $5,000 to $50,000.
We've heard a lot about.
Okay, so Bill, I have to ask you, because we're 20 days out, and she was quite unequivocal there and declarative. It's going to be different from Joe Biden's presidency administration here. But for the fact that we are 20 days out and she's still getting asked this question, how does that bode well or not well for the Harris campaign that 20 days out, she's still getting asked this question? Shouldn't she have put this question to bed earlier on?
Well, I think it's something that is inevitably going to be asked whenever a sitting vice president is going to succeed an incumbent president. Even in the best of circumstances, it's a perennial. How are you going to be different? And I would agree that she's had, the most difficulty in responding to this, somewhat oddly so, because I think what you saw in that answer was an available answer to give the whole time. It wasn't like she had to go, into a lab and cook that up. She's simply reciting the new policy ideas that she rolled out, a few weeks ago, which is sort of an easy way to say, here's how I'll be different. I have these new ideas that I'm going to pursue. So, part of that awkwardness, and we've seen this between, whether it was, George H.W. Bush and Ronald Reagan or Al Gore and Bill Clinton. There's always been a little bit of a tension between how are you going to be different than the predecessor.
Yeah.
And you don't want to do something that's going to cause a rift in your base, that you want to appeal to the swing. So it's taken her a little bit to get there, but I think what you saw tonight was getting there.
I mean, that is the, ultimate task of incumbent vice presidents, is how they can set themselves apart from the principal there at the top of the ticket, i.e. Joe Biden. And we've seen it. Well, we haven't really seen it as of late. I mean, we last saw it with Al Gore in 2000 about how he maneuvered that pretty tricky, touchy question here. Another tricky, touchy question that we haven't really gotten some type of response from Harris is about some of President Biden's perceived issues with his mental aptitude, with his age, and what she knew when about that question before he relinquished his place there at the top of the ticket. Bret Baier asked her this. I want to play this exchange here.
Call Donald Trump. He's misguided. You say now
he's unstable. He is unstable, Bret.
He's not well. You say he's mentally not stable.
He's not stable.
Let me ask you this. You told many interviewers that Joe Biden was on his game, that ran around circles on his staff. When did you first notice that President Biden's mental faculties appeared diminished?
Joe Biden, I have watched from the Oval Office to the Situation Room. And he has the judgment and the experience to do exactly what he has done in making very important decisions on behalf of the American people.
There were no concerns raised?
Bret, Joe Biden is not on the ballot.
I understand.
And Donald Trump
but
is.
But you talked about it.
And Donald Trump
After George Clooney said within a few minutes of talking to President Biden at a fundraiser that he thought this was not the same Joe Biden that we saw on the debate stage.
Donald Trump is on the ballot.
I understand. You met with him at least once a week for 3.5 years. You didn't have any concerns?
I think the American people have a concern about Donald Trump, which is why the people who know him best, including leaders of our national security community, have all spoken out. Even people who worked for him in the Oval Office, worked with him in the Situation Room, and have said he is unfit and dangerous and should never be president of the United States again, including his former vice president, which is why the job was open for him to choose another running mate. So that is a fact.
All right, Bill Scher joining me yet again here. So, Bill, was she ready for that question? Did she handle it deftly? Did she show any dexterity there with that question?
I think she was a little bit not ready for the way that question was posed. That was probably the most loaded question that Bret Baier had, where he basically presumed mental decline on Biden's part, and Harris, as some of you watch her interviews with Howard Stern or Charlemagne the God, whether it's a friendly interviewer or more, confrontational interviewer like Bret Baier was tonight, you can always get a premise in a question that you do not want to repeat, that you do not want coming out of your mouth. And you watch Harris, I'm not going to say I'm the Harris expert going back years or anything, but I've noticed this as of late. She will not repeat a premise that she does not want to have coming out of her mouth.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So, here is Baier trying to get her to say something about Joe Biden, whether it's to say Joe Biden was great the whole time or I know he's aged a little bit. She was not going to get into that because she does not want the soundbite that gets recirculated after the interview to be her saying the other thing. She wants to put the spotlight on Trump's stability. And Trump has been giving her a fair amount of material to work with in this regard, so it makes it a little bit easier for her to do that. But I think was it deft? It certainly was part of a planned approach to this interview to make sure she keeps the emphasis on Trump's competency and not get knocked off track.
Yeah, I mean, even to your point, I mean, by merely repeating the premise she does not agree with. She actualizes the premise herself, and it's out there, and it's in existence here. I want to just talk more about some of her media moves lately. There was a report in Reuters yesterday, Bill, that her team has reached out to Joe Rogan and his team with that podcast there. Is that a savvy move?
Well, I have to admit, I was a little bit unsure about it, going in when I first heard it, because I know Joe Rogan has, certain views on, say, transgender issues and how the pandemic went and vaccines that might get the kind of thing that might get Harris knocked off track of where she would like to be and get off message. And they're very long form interviews. They tend to go, some go 3 hours. So it can be hard to be an on message candidate, which clearly Harris likes to be.
I mean, she went an hour with Charlemagne the God yesterday, and some who watched that from start to finish said it was one of her best interviews, that she stayed on message that entire time.
She did, but you can certainly find times when Charlemagne had premises that she really did not want to indulge.
Okay.
And would not answer directly because she was determined to stay on her message. I mean, he didn't put the screws in on her when that happened. And I've heard different interpretations of Rogan, that he's somewhat of a passive interviewer, and so perhaps she could still do that, or that could be more combative. But I think you saw from today's interview that she does come prepared. She does not. I don't think she's making these decisions out of panic, out of haste. She's coming into these situations, ready for action, it seems.
Okay, because there were some Democrats on social media who were wondering what was behind this strategy here, whether or not they were reading the tea leaves about a campaign that was kind of grasping at straws in the final stretch. And then you had others, who had said, no, this is the strategy here. Better this point in time now, have voters who are undecided, voters you still need to persuade, watch this with 20 days to go so it's fresh in their mind.
Yeah, I lean towards more the latter there. I mean, between now and Election Day, I mean, there's two aspects to any campaign. There's air war and there's ground war. Ground war is, knocking on doors, mailers, phone banking, all that kind of stuff. And a lot of what we've seen reported is that the Harris campaign is outclassing the Trump campaign on that score. That's what reports are. Air war is ads, interviews, paid media and earned media. So if you're doing a rally, for example, and to some extent that's kind of ground game, but there's also a media aspect to it too. You're creating news coverage, for local media and national media. It can be hard to just do rally, and make news, because your stump speech tends not to vary all that much. So what do you do to create news?
To keep you in the news, right?
Exactly. So you're winning news cycles. I mean, the air war is who wins the news cycle that day. That's air war. Oh. And to some extent, Trump can be hard to crowd out of the news. He often makes news for himself, for good or for bad, but that can keep the spotlight on him. What can you do to create news? Have media interactions that are a little unexpected, a little unpredictable. Okay. So go on Fox, go on Rogan. I mean, it can be friendly or unfriendly. Call her daddy, Howard Stern. These are all things that are a little bit different and might create a little bit something that you haven't seen before, that creates its own headline. That she seems to be doing that pretty well over the past several days.
Yeah, and not to mention, I mean, Donald Trump is somewhat taking this same playbook going on some of these other untraditional media formats we've seen in the last few months here. Lastly, Bill, another question Harris has faced, since she became the nominee. How does she answer on some of her policy proposals that she holds now that she didn't hold when she was running for president the first time, or when she was running for the Senate here? Bret Baier asked her about this, including some of these flip-flops, perceived flip-flops on the issue of immigration. Let's watch.
There's a lot of people that look back at what you said in 2019 when you first ran for president. And there have been changes, and you've talked about some of them. When it comes to immigration, you supported allowing immigrants in the country illegally to apply for driver's license, to qualify for free tuition at universities, to be enrolled in free health care. Do you still support those things?
Listen, that was 5 years ago, and I'm very clear that I will follow the law. I have made that statement over and over again, and as Vice President of the United States, that's exactly what I've done, not to mention before.
If that's the case, you chose a running mate, Tim Walz, governor of Minnesota, who signed those very things into state law. So do you support that?
We are very clear, and I am very clear, as is Tim Walz, that we must support and enforce federal law, and that is exactly what we will do.
So decriminalizing border crossings, like you said in 2019.
I do not believe in decriminalizing border crossings, and I've not done that as vice president. I will not do that as president.
So these are evolutions that you've had.
But let's be very clear. I'm the only person who's running for president who has prosecuted transnational criminal organizations, from the Sinaloa cartel to the Guadalajara cartel to people who have trafficked in guns, drugs, and human beings. I have spent a significant part of my career going after people who present a threat to the safety of the American people and cross our border with the intent of doing us harm and cross our border illegally. And I will do that work as vice president.
So, Bill, I just wanted to ask, I mean, no matter how many journalists ask Harris about some of these policy reversals over the last 5 years here, you know, and we're all watching it play out, it doesn't ultimately matter what we think about them. It matters what the voters think about them and whether the voters can abide by them or not. Can they look past them or not? Is this a candidate who is trustworthy, who is outward-facing or not? That is for the voters to decide. Do I have that right? And they ultimately will.
Well, it is obviously the ultimate arbiter. Probably most voters think they all flip-flop and they all lie, and that can make life very challenging for candidates who want to draw distinctions. And look, we've seen how different candidates handle these sorts of questions. Donald Trump used to say he was pro-choice and was for single-payer health care. You know, he's in a different place today on these sorts of things. And if you put those points to him, he might often just tell a totally fictional story and say, "Well, I never said that," or that you're misremembering, or what have you. He's really going to cop to flip-flop. You talk to a J.D. Vance, where you said this about Donald Trump, and you took this position before. He might tell you a longer story and try to explain to you his evolution over time, whether it's on the level or not. Again, it's in the eye of the voter, but I think he probably takes a certain bit of pride in explaining to you the evolution. Harris definitely has the philosophy of if you're explaining, you're losing. Yeah. So she's not really getting into, well, here's why I said this in 2019. Here's why I'm saying this in 2024. She just sticks to, here's where I'm at in 2024. Those are the words that are going to come out of my mouth. You're not going to get the soundbite of me explaining where I was before. And if you don't like it, you can go complain about it later. But this is what I'm going to say.
Bill, I mean, this is a perfect encapsulation. I want to put up this tweet of what you were saying about Trump. Mark Caputo there at the Bulwark has this. At Trump's Univision town hall in Miami, an Arizona voter born in Mexico asks him, "Do you really believe that Haitians are eating the people's pets?" Trump responds, "I was just repeating what was reported. All I do is report." And Mark Caputo, kind of with this analysis, assigned the issue has stuck with swing state voters. That's how he explains it away or rationalize it, right? I mean, we're seeing it right here in this tweet.
But he's not. What it was reported was what was reported from his vice president. When his vice president reported what somebody said in a social media post, it wasn't reported in the news. But he's not going to really explain that whole chain of events. Nor is he saying there whether he was right or wrong in saying it. He wasn't denying it. He wasn't admitting fault or admitting inaccuracy. So nobody running is really prone to saying, "I got that wrong." Maybe Tim Walz, more than any of them, was pointing to say, "I'm a knucklehead and I got that one wrong." But how they handle these things in particular, I do think is somewhat revealing about how they handle the media, handle change, handle the revolution, and how they project strength to the voter.
Okay, because questions keep coming to me. I promise this is the last one. What about Harris's strategy? I mean, today in Pennsylvania, she held a single devoted rally about Republicans who are supporting her. Why put all that energy, all that resources into that very small sliver, that subset of maybe her voting share? I mean, Bill Kristol was there, Jeff Duncan was there. Are they focusing too heavily on it? Will it pay dividends or not for them? What's the point of highlighting it so much these are former Republicans, and they're voting for Harris.
If you look at most polls, and they'll break out their data. How are Democrats voting? How are Republicans voting? How are independents voting? You generally see, 95% of Democrats for Harris, 95% of Republicans for Trump. There's not a whole lot of crossover there. I think most polls I see a little bit more crossover in Harris's favor than vice versa, but it does depend on the poll. But there are independents. There are a lot of independents out there. You look at exit poll data and what they call verified voter post-election data. Your independent constituency has been running around, high 20s, low 30s past several elections, and that swings. That has gone different directions. The last 4 elections, twice it favored Democrats and twice it favored Republicans. So I don't necessarily think that Harris is expecting to have a huge number of registered Republicans or self-identified Republicans cross over because of these events, but it does signal to an independent voter who may be intrigued by the idea of more bipartisanship that Harris is for real on that subject. And Biden ran on that very successfully in 2020, spoke repeatedly about he wanted to restore the spirit of bipartisanship. A lot of Democrats thought it was naive. But I think it helped him win, and I think he actually delivered as president in many respects. Trump has been running a media strategy very, very heavy on conservative media. Not a lot. To the extent that he's been trying to cross over, I think he's having a town hall soon with Robert Kennedy and Tulsi Gabbard. So it's not like there's no attempt to kind of pull from the other side, but it's a different flavor of Democrat, if it's use that word very broadly,
sure, right.
than having former Trump administration officials or Bush officials or Reagan officials be around you.
Right.
So it's definitely 2 different theories of the case being played out, and whether it's going to work, that is for voters to decide in a few weeks.
All right, Bill Scher, we'll leave it at that. Thanks so much. We'll talk soon.
My pleasure. Take care.